How you doing, guys? Today we are starting the reassembly of the Briggs & Stratton engine. One of the last things I had to do or measure was the crankshaft end play. There was a ton of play in the crankshaft. There was almost 20 thousandths. So this thing with a 15 thousandths gasket, which is the minimum, and the cover had four of the bolts in and snugged down. It still had, with my dial calipers, the dial indicator, it had 21 thousandths of end play. So the crankshaft knocked around quite a bit. I knew that was going to be a problem because when I took the engine apart, there was a lot of crankshaft end play. And also, I know there was a couple comments. People were saying, oh, this is a waste of time, or I've just, whatever on a, I just changed the oil and add fuel to my Briggs & Stratton engines. And you know what? You're probably right. But this engine, right there, you can see this thing had a rod knock right by that oil hole. If I can get this, there it is. You can see it. The crankshaft was making contact with it. And it's in the thrust side and the power stroke side of the bearing, or the rod end. You can see where this is. It's clean. So, and then in my prior videos, I showed that the bore was scored really bad. So this was not just change the oil and add fuel. There was no way to get this particular engine back up and running. It would run, but it would eventually explode and probably smoke like a freight train. So that's the reason why. So now, back to the subject matter. Crankshaft end play. So I had about 21 thousandths crankshaft end play, so that meant I needed to get a couple parts. The specification for the engine is no more than 8 thousandths end play, and we really should be shooting, where was it? It was right here. Oh, I'm sorry, right here. 2 to 8 thousandths is the specification for the aluminum block. So with that, I had to order part number 220708, which is for a 1-inch PTO crankshaft. That's the thrust washer. It actually goes between the oil sump and the timing gear, the crank timing gear. There's a little shim that you can put in, which I have right here. It was cheap. It was $6, so I said the heck with it. So it's in place. I then took my minimum 15 thousandths gasket. That's the dark gasket right there. That's a standard, side plate, standard sump gasket for Briggs & Stratton engines. Measured it. We were too tight. It was actually tight to turn the crank. And there was no play. So I was like, all right, we need to do something else. So I went ahead and pulled out an old 5 thousandths thick shim gasket out of a kit. Unfortunately, this one was ripped and folded in half, but when I put it in place and snugged down the bolts, I ended up with 3 to 4 thousandths end play. Perfect. So I ordered a new gasket because the one I had was destroyed. Here it is. Put the cover on, and I'm measuring 3 thousandths. Actually, it's like right here. I was at 37025, and basically what I was doing is measuring from the end of the crankshaft to the top of the bearing in the case or the sump. And then with the gasket, I ended up being 30755. So, and that's snug down. So it gave me like 3 thousandths clearance. The crank spins in the block perfectly. So with all that sorted out, I'm going to go ahead, blow out the block, take a pipe cleaner, clean the valve guides out real good, make sure everything's good and clean and ready for assembly. And we'll go ahead, and the first thing we're going to do is put the valves back in. With the valve stem all greased up and the guide all greased up, we're ready to go. I got my spring and my keeper in the spring compressor, so I'm just going to go ahead, line them up, and then get this smaller piece of the keeper set in the groove of the valve, and then I'll unload the spring pressure, and that valve should be a-okay. All right, we got the piston rings on the piston. My particular engine, this is the diagram that I used. The bevel's up on the top ring, the scraper is facing towards the skirts, and then the oil control ring can go in just about any way you want. It can go either direction. So there, right there. Oops, let's see if we can get this straight. There you go. Not really, but trust me, the groove is up on that, and then and if we go like this, you can see the scraper is down. So that's all set to go. Clean the rod, clean the cap, clean the bolts. This engine didn't have a bolt retainer, and the rod didn't come with one, so I had another engine, a junk engine, so I pulled the bolt retainer off it, and I'm going to use that to hold the bolts in place. I cleaned the pin. Make sure you clean if you have a hollowed out one or like a tube style one like this, make sure you clean the inside. All that garbage came out from inside that pin, so make sure you clean that. Everything is squeaky clean. I'm going to go ahead install the piston on the rod. The way I have it oriented is like this, so basically the markings of the piston will be towards the valves, and the oil hole is facing up. So I made a little mark just to remind me that the piston has to go on the rod in this direction. All right, let's get it all lubed up and put back together, and then we can start talking about installing the crank. I have the piston all lubed up, all the rings. I've staggered the rings so none of the end gaps are in line with each other. I got the ring compressor out. One thing to note when you do a aluminum block engine, these little dimples in the ring compressor, you want those up. Those are for an iron block. If you did this on an aluminum block and you go ahead and you knock the piston into the motor, those little notches that you can see can actually make marks and really kind of mess up the deck. So make sure you don't use this side. You want to use the flat side or the round side of your ring compressor. That is what you want facing the deck of the block. So I'm going to go ahead and lube everything up and knock that piston in. All right, piston's in, rod is in. I got the bolts just snugged down. I broke out my old school bar torque wrench. If we go to the book here, what's it? Where am I? Aluminum, right? Yeah, there, 130 thousandths number, 100 inch-pounds. So that's what we're gonna do. I'll do it in a couple stages, bring it up to like 20, 30, then 50, and then I'll go to 100. And then I'll bend down the lock tabs with a pair of pliers. My mind skipped a beat there, sorry. Okay, everything's torqued down to 100 inch-pounds. I put the crank timing gear in place. I have the timing mark roughly right here. I don't know if that's exactly where it needs to be, but it's probably pretty close. I did spin the motor around. It spins real nice, real smooth. As you can see, everything in the bore is real nice. There's a couple little marks that are from the rings, but no gouges, no scratches, so we're good. Put the lifters in. The exhaust lifter went back in the exhaust bore, as well as the intake in the intake bore. A little bit of white lithium grease on the lobes and the lifters. I'll put assembly lube here on the end of the camshaft. I already filled the journal, the cam journal, with assembly lube and oil, so that's all set. Basically, it's just line everything up and drop the cam in with the timing marks facing each other. With the cam now in the motor, I got the oil slinger and the governor in place. Then right there is the little tension washer that goes between the governor arm or the slinger arm and the sump. I also have the crank shim in place, so that just needs to be lubed up, and we have our timing marks right there in alignment. So we should be all set. Just go ahead and lubricate everything up really good, and then I'm going to get the 2 gaskets and the oil sump and put that on and start to torque that in place. There's the bulk of the short block all back together. I mean, everything just looks so good. Engine spins around real nice. The crank doesn't really have any end play. It's a little tighter than I would hope, or I would have liked, but the engine spins around so smooth and nice. There's no real resistance or anything. The only fail, if there was a fail, is I went to go put the main seal in, and when I sprayed it with some brake cleaner just to make sure it was clean, a big chunk broke off it and it cracked. So unfortunately, the main seal for the PTO, that's junk, and I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to get another one, because where this is going to go on the tractor, if it starts to really leak bad out that PTO seal, it's just going to be a complete nightmare. So I'm going to go ahead, order one of those up, be back, and we'll start putting the other ancillary parts on the motor. Because I'm getting ready to put the head on, and this is probably one of the reasons why I don't like working on Briggs & Stratton engines. Everything on these engines, even the old 5-horse L-head horizontal shaft engines, everything's just layered. It's just like such a pain in the ass. You can't put the head on unless you have the gas tank ready. Well, you can't have the gas tank ready until you have the carburetor. Well, you can't really do the carburetor until you have all the governor stuff put in place. It's like layers upon layers, because the head bolts actually go through this plate, this mounting plate. So in order to put the head on, I gotta start the head and then get the gas tank on, because this is the intake tube. This is the breather tube, right? Intake area and the breather right there. So you gotta have all that ready to go. So you can just put it all on and then torque the head into place. The other thing too is, obviously I put the carburetor on real quick, held in by 3 screws. I did put 2 base gaskets in, which is probably not right. Which is not right, because you're only supposed to have 1. But my other carburetor, it would always weep fuel out this side. So, and I had another one of these engines that had 2 gaskets, and it never weeped. So even though this carburetor's NOS, I just barely snugged the 3 screws that hold it in place, so that way I don't warp the base. So that's all bolted in. I have the screw in order to keep the choke plate in place, so when I go ahead and mount the throttle piece to the side of the carburetor, this little tang right there, that bottom tang, actually hits the base of the throttle. It takes a couple little tiny screws. I have one right here, and the second one is right there, and they're mounted in this position and that position. Again, this is an NOS carburetor, so I'm going on the assumption that the diaphragm, the pulse diaphragm, is fine and everything is set up. I might reset this jet just in case, but overall it should be ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt this into place, and then I got to clean this up because oil is just kind of weeping out of the bore a little bit from the rings. I'm going to push the piston back, re-oil up the bore, tip the engine a little bit, and start to install the head. So after a little bit of a fight, everything is in place. Gas tank is installed, carburetor is installed, throttle's installed, the governor spring is installed. We've got all the little linkages for the governor all installed, the arm, everything moves nice and free. So I'm really happy about that. The breather tube is hooked up and done. The head bolts are all in place. They've all been torqued to 140 inch-pounds as per the manual and using the pattern that they've given. So that's all done. What else? Oh yes, the bore tin up underneath, that's installed. So that's all set. I am still waiting for the lower seal. I'll have to just install that carefully once it shows up. But the only thing I have a little bit of an issue with for some reason is the back bolt for the gas tank. I really had to crank up on the gas tank to get this bolt in. This is just temporary until I find the original, but it's a little bit disconcerting, but what are you going to do? Moving on. I'm not stopping. Everything lines up real nice, but whatever. Maybe this bracket's a little tweaked or something to that effect. Who knows? Who cares? You know, the paint got a little bit chewed up where I torqued the bolts down, but it is what it is again. And then I just have the spark plug in place, the new spark plug in place. I have to gap it, and I still have to put the ignition module in. I still have to put the stator in. There's a couple other little pieces of tin that have to go on, flywheel, clutch, the whole 9 yards. But that will be for another video. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for all your support, wonderful comments. I hope you're enjoying this series. I know I said I was going to be working on my senior. We'll be getting back to the senior very shortly, but for right now, I just wanted to get this engine cranked out and hopefully on the rug carpet cut for the Zagre Tractor Show coming up in October. So that's not a lot of time because I got to get this engine all together, got to get it up and running, got to break it in a little bit, and then I got to get it installed in the tractor, which is no easy task because I basically have to field strip the tractor in order to get the engine off and then to get this engine on. But that's, again, for another day. Until then, thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe. And as always, until we work on this engine again, you have a great day.